There's a popular mistake apologists make when applying the moral argument and talking about the moral argument with people. We're going to discuss that in this episode. The moral argument is a very well-known, famous, and I think good argument for God's existence. There's two forms I've heard. One is the more C.S. Lewis, Norm Geisler form. You do hear Craig say this too, William Lane Craig. Every law has a lawgiver. There is a moral law, therefore there's a moral lawgiver. I think that's a fine argument. But people, I think, take this argument in apologetics. The other form would be more I hear from Craig, and is that is if God doesn't exist, there are no objective moral duties. There are moral objective duties, therefore God exists. But looking more at this first form, the Lewis form, every law has lawgiver. There is a moral law, therefore there is a moral lawgiver. I think it's a fine argument. I like it. It's a good argument. But I think that we as apologists sometimes make an illegitimate jump from that argument to God being the moral law. So if we just say there is a moral law because there isn't a moral law because we can see this in experience around the world and throughout history, and then there must be a moral lawgiver, I think that's fine. However, when we start saying that God is the moral law, I think we're in trouble. Why? Because it doesn't make any sense. God is an infinite being. He's necessary. He's unchanging. He's eternal, impassible, immaterial, all these things. We're the opposite of that, right? We're contingent, finite, material, changeable, passable, temporal, all that kind of stuff. So how can a God that has all those characteristics be the standard for beings like us? So God is ABC. We're not at all ABC. We're XYZ. Not even really in the same alphabet as God. So what sense does it really make to say that God is our standard? What sense does it to say that God is the moral law? I have argued many times that God is not a moral being, and I think as apologists we have to maintain that yes, there is a moral law among humans, but God isn't equivalent to that law. Well, what is? As I've said in another video, another podcast, there is a moral law, and God is the cause of that moral law, and you have to have a transcendent cause of the moral law for there to be law. If there's no cause or it's some kind of transcendence with a moral law, with any kind of law, then there is no law. So Lewis is right. If there's a moral law, there's got to be a moral lawgiver. And I think it's right to say God is the moral lawgiver, but I think it's wrong to say God is the moral law himself, or that God prescribes laws in accordance with his nature. Because when God tells people, don't steal, don't lie, don't kill, that's not really violating God's nature. It's violating our nature as humans. God can't murder. God can't steal. God can't lust. God can't do the kind of sins that we can do because he's not the kind of being to be able to do that. Why? Because he's not a human. God is an infinite being, nothing like human beings. I've already said all these things, all these classical attributes, and we're not. So as apologists, we need to use these arguments, but we need to not make this illegitimate sidestep to saying that there is a moral law and God is that moral law. No, God is not our standard of morality. One, because God's not a moral being. What does that even mean to say God is a moral being? What kind of law is he under? He's not under any kind of law. So where does our morality come from? Well, it does come from God as our efficient cause. God is our efficient cause, meaning that he is the ultimate reason and the ultimate cause as to why we have this morality. But ultimately, it comes also from our formal cause and our nature as human beings, which is just that, human beings. We are finite, and God has given us a human nature. Now, this is a big debate among philosophers as to whether or not essentialism or realism is true versus nominalism, which says that we don't have a human nature. We're all very much alike, but we don't have this shared nature. And so nominalists say that we don't have this nature, and realists or essentialists say that we do. So as a realist, as an essentialist, as a natural law proponent, I argue that the moral law does exist. God is the cause of that moral law because he's the cause of our nature, all right? He's the cause of human beings. And because he's the cause of human beings, he is the ultimate objective, transcendent, ultimate efficient cause of morality, but he is not identical to that morality. Human beings have a moral code written in our hearts that apply to human beings. We don't take a divine moral law and apply it to humans because God's not. So human laws apply to humans, and an infinite non-human being is not the standard for finite human beings. So these moral arguments are good. We should keep using them, but we should not make the mistake of equating God with the moral law or saying that he is in any way a moral being. He transcends that. The book of Job, clear about that. The Bible is clear about that. Reason is clear about that. So use the moral law argument. Good luck with it. Don't say God's the moral being or the moral law. Cheers.